Welcome back to the Blazor Server In-Depth course. In this lesson, we're going to wrap up this section by going over our homework and reviewing what we've learned. So in this section, we've talked about components, all about components. So using pages as components and then passing parameters into our components and even passing in other components into our components as parameters and then getting information back out of those components as well. So through all of this, we've kind of done pieces and parts, but now we're going to put it all together in our homework. So let's look at what our homework was. So our homework was to create a Blazor site with the following: a list of components that shows a user's first name and last name. So it could be, one or it could be multiple users, and each will have a first name and a last name. But then next to the first and last name, we have a fix button. So that's going to allow us to change how the user's first and last name is displayed. And that's going to show us a list of name alternatives. For example, maybe last name, comma, first name, or first initial last name, and so on we go. And then finally, clicking on alternative should update the displayed name for that user. So we should start off with just a list of first and last names. But as we fix them, we should have some look a little differently because we've changed that particular name. All right, so that's our homework. Let's get started on getting this working. So let's create a new project, Blazor app. It's going to call it Blazor app, and this is section 5 homework. Blazor Server App .NET Core 3.1 or ASP.NET Core 3.1 and HTTPS. Hit create. And now we have this created, we can start working on our component. So let's create. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do this using string interpolation. That way, we know that it's going to come out correctly. So oops, we have to wrap this in parens because string interpolation won't work otherwise. All right, so first name, space, last name, like so. That's one option. So that's the normal, I would say, option. But then you have another way, which is last name, and we'll have a comma, space, first name. That's another way. And this third way we can do is we can say first name dot substring of 0, 1. So just the first initial, and then we'll have no space. So first initial, last name. Actually, you know what? Let's put first initial dot or period in a space. So it'd be T period space Corey. So that's possible. Another way of doing it would be to do something similar. Actually, let's copy this first one. And this last one would be to have our just that first name. We'll also do a substring again, and 0, 1, but this time have no space, more like what you'd see for an email address, like tcorey. Okay, so there's our 4 different options of what we could do for our view type. So let's create a method that is going to be private void, and it's going to be whenever one of these is clicked. So on name selected. All right, and that's going to be whenever anything's clicked, and we'll pass in a string selected name, like so. But now we need to call this whenever any of these gets clicked. So we have the on click. And we could just say equals and then just give it a on name selected like so. But that's a problem because we're not going to pass in the selected name. See, it needs to have a selected name here. But what we can do is we can do something like this, where we pass in a function essentially. So let's change this. And we're going to say, let's start off with an open parens, another open parens, and a close parens. And we'll do our arrow, and then we're going to say on name selected and pass in a value here. Okay, so we're going to pass in the value, right now empty string, just so we have something. And that should call this on name selected. Now it's yelling at us right now because there's double quotes here, but we have these double quotes here, and so that's causing a conflict. So what we're going to do is make this a little better in a number of ways. And we're going to say private string, let's call it normal type. And then private string reversed type. And private string initial type. And then private string email type, like so. And then we're going to take this code right here. We're going to copy it and replace this. And then we'll do the same thing for all the rest of them, like so. And it's yelling at us because of this. Aha, because these aren't initialized necessarily right away. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create that protected override on parameter set. And that, of course, messes our formatting up. No worries. And then in here is where we can do the assignment. So we can do this. And we can do this. And we can replace these with our double quotes, which will work. And then we'll just set up the other two. So normal type and reverse type, like so. And then come up here and do our copy again. There's the reverse type, and there's the normal type. Okay, so that allows us now to reuse this more than once. So in here, we can just say at normal type. And then here, we can say reverse type. And then for this one, initial type. And for this last one, we can say email type. Okay? And then we can more easily pass this in by saying normal type. Okay? So now we're doing on the onClick event is we're calling onNameSelected, but passing in the type that was selected. Okay? So that allows us to do an onClick event and have a parameter. So we'll do this for all the onClicks, and we'll just change that parameter to whatever one they clicked on. Okay, so there's a little bit of complex code here, or at least complex logic and thinking through, but let's talk about what it's doing. At the very root of it, we have 4 different ways of displaying a name pair. So first and last name. So first name space last name comma first name, first initial dot space last name, or the email address type, which is first initial last name with no space. We're going to display those 4 types to the user based upon the parameters being passed in, the first and last name. Those get displayed in these 4 paragraph tags. Now, the user gets to choose which one to click on. If they click on the normal type, then it's going to call onNameSelected for that normal type, which is first name space last name. That onNameSelected is going to raise the event, which we don't have yet. Okay, we'll get there. But if they click instead on reverse type, then they'll get the reverse type passed into onNameSelected, and so on down the list. So let's do a couple little housekeeping things first. Did invoke async, we're going to pass in that string, which is just a selected name. That's it. So when you click on one of these, it's going to invoke this and say, hey, here's a name that was selected. That's our component. That's everything we need for our component. Now let's create our user component. So new item. We'll call this, let's leave component on the name, so user component. We didn't for this name choice. We probably should have name choice component, but we're just going to call the user component. So now in here, what we'll do is we will say private string, and this is going to be the user's name. Okay, the username to display, and we'll start it off with nothing. And we'll also have a parameter that's going to take in a first name, and we're going to have one for last name as well. And we're going to have one more just to kind of prove that we're not just duplicating the work here. I'm going to have one more that is message. And that's the message the user wants to display. Okay, so now you have 3 parameters we're passing into this component. So let's start off with an h2 tag, and we're going to have in here user name, which is going to be composed of at first name and last name. How do I do that? Well, protected, override, and whoops, I was going too fast there and hit tab. Let's try it again. Protected, override, and it's the on parameter set. And let's shift tab to bring us back one. And what we'll do is we will say that username equals, and we'll do our string interpolation, first name space last name. So by default, we're going to have the normal way of doing things, the first name space last name. That'll be what gets displayed here. And then we'll have a button underneath that that says fix. So button and the class equals btn dash primary. That sounds good. And it will say fix. And let's have a private Boolean here. Private bool show fix equals false. And then we'll have an if statement here. If show fix, then what we'll do is we will show the component name choice. Okay, where first name, well, let's look, name choice should have, it does, first name and last name. So let's go back over here and change that to say first name. There we go. Now it's lighting up. First name is going to be first name, and last name is going to be last name. And then we'll have one more, which is on name type selected. Handle on name type selected, which we don't have yet. Okay, not a problem. So let's create that. So come down here and create that. And it looks like I'm missing a closed curly brace in my code. That's odd. I wonder why that is. Let's see if I can put it in. There we go. Okay, so now we have our private void handle on name type selected, and it's going to pass, bring in a string, and it's going to be new name. And then in here, which now we have one extra, that's awesome. Actually, two extras. So now we have this handle on name type selected. We can say that username equals new name. And that should change this value, which gets displayed right up here. So the last thing we need to do is have a toggle for this. So we're going to have another method, and this will be private void, and this is going to be toggle show fix. And we're going to say that show fix equals not show fix. Okay, that's how you kind of flip the bit here. And if it's true, it's false, and if it's false, it's true. Okay, and we're going to call this on click of this button. On click equals toggle show fix. Okay, so now this should show our username. It should not show it should not show this section down here unless show fix is true, which only happens when you click the button. Now, that should be all we need for our user component. Let's create a model for our users. So we're going to create a new folder. We'll call it models. And then in here, we'll create a user model. So user model. And in here, we'll have three properties. The first name, the last name, and the message. Okay. And now you can create a new page. This is an actual full page. And let's call this, which is still a component, let's call this the directory component. I think it's fine. And we're going to say this is at page/directory. Okay, so whenever we ask a directory, this is what we'll get. And in the in here, we're going to have private list of user model. We'll call this user list. And we'll actually make this nope, we're just going to make this equal to a new list of user model. We do want to add a using statement somewhere. So let's add the using statement in our imports at using Blazor app.models. We'll save that. So now we have access to this. And now what we can do is create a constructor. In our constructor, we can just create a new list of users. So again, just pretending like we already have this in the database. So we'll say, actually we can initialize it as well. So you can say user list equals new list of users. And inside here we can say new user model. We can say first name equals Tim, last name equals Corey, and message equals hello world. Which I'm not sure that in our user model, in our user component, we didn't actually show that message. Let's do that. So we'll say, let's do an H3 tag that says message. Just we have something to show that that message is showing up. Okay, so we're going to put our semicolon at the end here. We'll copy this and create a couple more. Let's do 2 more. So we'll do Sue, and we'll do Storm, and we'll say greetings here. Greetings is fine, and then Mary Smith, and we'll say good day. Okay, so those are 3 users that we can list through. And then up here, what we'll do is we'll create a div with a class equal to row. And then inside there, we're going to have a for each that's going to loop through our user list. And so for each of these, we're going to create a div with a class equal to call. And let's say that call 4, which will actually space them neatly across the screen. If we had more than that, they'd wrap around. That's fine. So in here, what we'll do is we will say user component, where first name equals at first name. Actually at u dot first name. Last name equals at u dot last name. And then the message equals at u dot message. Okay, so there's our component. That's all we need or should need. Let's now go to our navigation page and add a navigation link for this. Now just called directory. So directory, and we'll just say directory, and we'll do the, let's just do roulette one more time. Hold it for a little while, wait for it, see what we get, and spreadsheet. That works. So now we can run this app and see if everything works as it should. There's got to be one bug or two, right? We'll find out. So directory. There's our 3 listings. Let's fix my name. I want Corey, Tim. Notice it fixed it, but it didn't collapse after I made a change. We can fix that. That seemed like a small little change. So on the user component, when the handle name type is selected, then what we'll say is show fix equals false. Let's try it again. So as you can see, this has made this pretty painless to do. Now it's not pretty, it's still quite ugly, but I can select a different name for myself. So can Sue. Let's do S Storm and let's do Smith, Mary. But you can see how all three of these can now have a different way of displaying their name using those components, and we can show and hide those things, and it just makes for a really seamless experience. So again, please apply better styling than I have, but you can at least see how these different tools work and how to combine them and use them in new and interesting ways. So that's it for the homework. We create a list of components that shows a user's first name and last name. We create a fix button next to each name that allows them to pick name alternatives like this. And we allowed for them to choose that name alternative and see that reflected on the page when they did. Okay, so we got this all working the way we intended it to. We're using a lot of the techniques we saw throughout this section. And now it's time to kind of wrap things up and make sure that you have a real firm grasp on how to work with components in Blazor. Because as you can see, components are a really big part of any Blazor application. Okay, so get a firm grasp on that. Make sure that you take the time you need to really understand it instead of just skipping ahead to the next section. But once you're ready, move on to the next section where we'll learn about how to build forms and take data off a page.